kind of organized chaos that only early mornings could deliver. The loudspeaker crackled every few seconds, boarding calls echoing through concourses. Coffee cups clinked, rolling suitcases wheeled in every direction, and the TSA lines snaked. Like restless snakes near Terminal C. Officer Karen Willis walked with purpose, her eyes sharp beneath her dark uniform cap. At her side trotted Rex, a sturdy, amber-eyed German shepherd with a sleek coat and the posture of a soldier. His nose moved with precision, sniffing each trash can, bag, an unattended item like his life depended on it. It kind of did. Karen had been with the airport's K-9 unit for over a decade, and in all those years, Rex had proven himself again and again. He wasn't the fastest or the flashiest dog on the force, but he was the most focused. If Rex sat down in front of something, it meant trouble. No false alerts, no games. Just instinct and training honed like a blade. This morning was supposed to be easy. A quick sweep of Terminal C's outer gates before the first wave of mid-morning departures took flight. Gate 27 was their final stop. One last scan and they'd be off duty by noon. Karen had already promised Rex a hamburger from the In-N-Out by the cargo exit. As they approached Gate 27, she noticed a pilot standing by the wall near the boarding counter, sipping a cup of black coffee. He had that clean, seasoned look most career pilots wore: trim beard, crisp uniform, cap perched perfectly on his head. His black duffel sat on the floor at his feet, slightly scuffed like it had seen hundreds of flights. The gate agent nodded at Karen. That's Captain Monroe, one of the regulars on the Denver route. Cool guy. Karen gave a polite smile and kept walking. Rex slowed as they neared the captain's bag. His ears perked, his head tilted slightly. Karen noticed. Then it happened. Rex sat, just like that. No bark, no growl, no hesitation. A perfect, motionless sit. Karen's breath caught in her throat. In training, this action was the ultimate signal. It meant Rex had detected something he'd been trained to find, either explosives, narcotics, or certain chemical compounds. And Rex never made mistakes. The pilot noticed and raised his brow, his voice calm but amused. Hope he's not allergic to caffeine, he joked, motioning toward the coffee. Karen stepped closer, eyes on Rex. Sir, I'm going to need you to step away from the bag, please. Monroe blinked. It's just my flight kit. Snacks, a change of socks, the usual. But Rex didn't move. His gaze was locked on the duffel. Karen's heart rate quickened. Her hand went to the radio on her shoulder. Unit 3 to dispatch, she said evenly. Possible alert at Gate 27. Requesting backup and secondary screening team. K-9 alert on carry-on item. Area not secured. The response was immediate. Copy that, Unit 3. Officers en route. Locking down Gate 27. The pilot's easy smile began to fade. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other. Look, I've got to get this plane ready to go in 20. My co-pilot's already aboard. Karen took a slow step between Rex and the pilot. Sir, please move back now. Within 2 minutes, 2 additional officers arrived and began escorting nearby passengers out of the gate area. The gate agent frowned as the airport alarm quietly flashed yellow. Terminal C was still in motion, but Gate 27 was now frozen in time. The duffel bag was carefully picked up by a bomb technician with gloved hands. It was placed into a containment bin and wheeled to a secure scanner. Karen gave Rex a light pat. He was still sitting, not moving a muscle. The pilot folded his arms. Is this really necessary? Karen didn't look at him. She watched the bomb tech as he peered at the scanner screen and froze. The tension in the air thickened instantly. The technician turned to the officers. It's not a bomb, he said slowly, voice tense. But whatever this is, it's not supposed to be in a flight bag. Karen felt a cold wave roll down her spine. She looked at Rex, who finally stood up. Mission accomplished. Something was deeply wrong, and the morning had just begun. The small cluster of uniformed officers surrounding Gate 27 moved with the efficiency of a well-rehearsed orchestra. Passengers were quietly herded away. The boarding call on the loudspeaker abruptly stopped. Overhead, a soft chime replaced the usual announcements, signaling a localized alert. Few people knew what it meant, but Karen did. Standing beside Rex, she kept her eyes on the pilot. The man still identified himself as Captain Monroe, but something in his body language had shifted. His arms were still crossed, but his posture no longer radiated calm. It was rigid, controlled, too controlled. "Sir," Officer Delgado said, stepping closer, "I need you to come with us while we run a deeper check." The pilot's gaze didn't flinch. "You're making a mistake," he said, his voice smooth but cold. "I've got a cabin crew waiting. 36 passengers boarded. You really want to delay this flight over a dog's nose?" Delgado didn't reply. Instead, he gestured, and 2 more officers took up position behind the pilot. Karen remained by Rex, her hand gripping the leash, though she knew he didn't need it. Her eyes scanned the surrounding area. People watched from a distance, phones out, filming from behind windows. The tension was starting to ripple outward. Karen's earpiece crackled. "Unit 3, we've got initial scanner results. No explosives. Contents include clothing, hygiene products, and a shielded container housing multiple vacuum-sealed pouches. We're pulling it apart now." "Roger that," Karen replied. Her stomach nodded. Shielded containers didn't belong in carry-on luggage. Shielding was used to block X-rays only. People hiding something used it. That something was rarely good. She stepped closer to Delgado. "This guy's too calm," she murmured. "He's not asking questions. He's not nervous. Either he's clean and pissed, or he's trained for this." Delgado nodded subtly. "We're running his credentials again. Just flagged something strange in the ID system. Give it another minute." Karen returned to Rex, kneeling beside him and giving his shoulder a firm rub. "Good boy," she whispered. Rex flicked his ear and leaned into the praise. But even he seemed tense, as if he knew the air had shifted from routine to something darker. 2 TSA agents emerged from the side door, carrying a small, reinforced box, the kind usually reserved for evidence transport. Behind them, the bomb technician followed, his expression unreadable. They placed the box on a secure table near the agents. Karen walked over, gloves on, and carefully lifted the lid. Inside were 9 vials, each about the size of a marker. The liquid inside shimmered slightly, with colors shifting faintly between pale blue and silver. Each vial was labeled with an alphanumeric code. No pharmaceutical logos, no manufacturer details. "What the hell is this?" Karen muttered. A voice from behind answered, "That's what we're trying to figure out." She turned to see Agent Ron Lieberman from Homeland Security, already on site due to a separate cargo sweep. He'd caught wind of the alert and followed it straight to Gate 27. "These aren't commercial drugs," he said, examining one vial under the light. "That's military-grade thermal shielding on the container. Whatever these are, they were meant to avoid detection, even from radiation scanners." Karen felt the knot in her stomach twist tighter. "You think it's biological?" "Could be experimental," Lieberman replied. "Could be banned neuroagents. We won't know until we get this to the lab." Behind them, Delgado's voice rose in pitch. "Karen, you'll want to hear this." She turned. Delgado stood holding the pilot's ID in one hand and a printout in the other. "This guy isn't Captain Monroe," Karen blinked. "What?" The real Monroe retired 2 years ago. This ID checks out on visual, but the background doesn't match. The fingerprints came back to a Julian Maddox dishonorably discharged from the Air Force. Last known activity? Unauthorized access to a research lab in Nevada. Vanished 6 years ago. Karen turned to the man in the pilot's uniform, who now stood silently between the two officers. No resistance. No questions. Just cold, unwavering focus in his eyes. "You've been flying under a false identity," she said. Julian Maddox tilted his head slightly and gave the faintest smile. "You think this is about one flight?" he said quietly. "You have no idea what's already in motion." Rex let out a low, uneasy growl. And that was when Karen knew they weren't just dealing with smuggling. They were standing at the edge of something far more dangerous. The evidence room at the airport's Homeland Security Annex buzzed with controlled urgency. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead as technicians in lab coats analyzed the mysterious vials recovered from Julian Maddox's carry-on. Officers, now working with FBI personnel, crowded into a small observation room that looked more like a bunker than a laboratory. Karen stood stiffly at the glass, arms folded, watching the lead chemist rotate one of the shimmering vials under a cold blue light. Rex sat at her feet, calm but alert, his eyes never leaving the table where the vials were now arrayed in a surgical tray. "Look at that," said Agent Lieberman beside her, tapping the glass. "See the way the fluid reacts to heat? That isn't adrenaline. That's synthetic and potent." Karen furrowed her brow. "You're telling me this is a drug?" The chemist stepped out, removing his gloves. "Not just a drug," he said grimly. "This is Neurocell X, a classified neural enhancer developed under a discontinued DARPA contract. Enhances cognitive reflexes, suppresses fatigue, boosts spatial awareness. It was scrapped 5 years ago after reports of aggression, psychotic breaks, even death." Karen blinked. "So how did it end up in an airport terminal? Inside a commercial pilot's duffel?" "No idea," he replied. "But these vials were never supposed to leave a level 4 military lab. They're tagged with nano-IDs. Somebody stole them, and whoever it was knew exactly how to avoid detection until your dog found it." Lieberman looked down at Rex. He just exposed one of the most dangerous chemical agents ever made. Probably stopped it from being smuggled into a civilian population. Karen exhaled slowly, tension creeping into her bones. "But why deliver it this way? Why fly it commercial?" "Because it's the last place anyone would look," Lieberman answered. "A pilot's carry-on? Nobody checks that deeply unless there's cause." It's brilliant, really. Terrifying, but brilliant. Meanwhile, in an interrogation room 2 floors below, Julian Maddox sat with cuffs on his wrists and a blank expression on his face. His posture was still relaxed. No sweat on his brow. No signs of fear. Just unsettling composure. FBI Agent Michelle Grant leaned forward, voice low. "Let's talk straight. You impersonated a pilot, snuck onto 6 flights, and nearly slipped a top-secret neuro agent through airport security. You're facing life in federal prison. Now tell us, who are you working for?" Maddox tilted his head, almost amused. "You think this was about the delivery?" he said quietly. "You really believe I was the endpoint?" Agent Grant frowned. "Explain." Maddox leaned back in the chair. "You're so focused on the vials, so focused on me. But I'm just the decoy. A signal flare. While you're all here, chasing one ghost, the real cargo's already in the air." He smiled. "Flight 742. You're about to miss it." Upstairs, a technician burst into the observation room holding a tablet. "Ma'am," he said to Karen, urgency rising in his voice. "We ran the flight logs like you asked. Maddox boarded 5 flights in the last 3 months. Always regional. But here's what's strange on each one. At the same gate, on the same day, another pilot used a matching alias. Karen stiffened. Are you saying he's part of a network? Worse, the tech replied. It's coordinated. Whoever's behind this, Maddox, isn't the only one. There are more pilots, more vials, possibly more labs. And another flight is en route right now with a second carrier. Karen exchanged a look with Lieberman. Which flight? She asked. The technician scrolled. 742. Departed 40 minutes ago. En route to Seattle. Commercial jet. Full passenger list. Rex stood. Suddenly alert. Karen didn't hesitate. Get Seattle Homeland on the line. We need that plane grounded immediately. And pull the footage check who boarded. If there's another Maddox, we're not waiting for him to land. As she spoke, her radio crackled. Unit 3, be advised possible. Match for second pilot ID. Similar behavior at gate 14, 1 week ago. We are reviewing scans now. Karen's jaw clenched. They weren't chasing a lone smuggler. They were unraveling a web one strand at a time, and time was running out. Julian Maddox's file sat open across the table, pages fanned out like a forensic crime scene. Karen stared down at the spread. Black and white mugshots from the Air Force, lab notes riddled with redacted sections, and a photograph that didn't belong, an image of Maddox in military uniform, standing beside a crate marked Confidential Biological Class B. His smile in the picture was tight, calculated. Agent Brandt leaned on the desk beside her. We got his full file from the DOD. It wasn't easy. Most of it was sealed tighter than Fort Knox, but the story's worse than we thought. Karen didn't look up. Go on. Maddox was a test pilot for Project Lancer Experimental Neurobiology for Combat Aviation. They gave him early versions of the very drug you just found. He was one of 12 subjects. Outperformed every other pilot in reflexes, flight time endurance, threat detection. But after 6 months, he started showing ... anomalies. Anomalies? Karen asked. Grant nodded grimly. Paranoia. Mood swings, violent tendencies. Said he could see things, patterns in air traffic that weren't there. Claimed he could predict crashes before they happened. Karen exhaled. Let M guess he wasn't wrong. Grant looked uneasy. He wasn't. That's the scary part. 2 of the flights he warned about actually had mechanical failures within the week. One was grounded last minute. The other had a bird strike, but the crew avoided a crash. Karen finally looked up. So what happened to the others in the program? 2 died from seizures. 4 disappeared off-grid. The rest were quietly reassigned. Maddox was pulled after a security breach caught trying to smuggle raw chemical compounds off a base in Nevada, and they let him go? No, Grant said. He escaped during transport. His record was buried so deep that when he resurfaced under the name Monroe, he slipped through every background system. He knew exactly what to fake and who wouldn't double-check a clean FAA application. Karen's stomach turned. How many flights has he piloted under this alias? Grant tapped the tablet in her hand. 14 that we can confirm. But the scary part is, this may not be about flying passengers. It may be about mapping air routes, tracking ideal drop points, altitude conditions, and security blind spots. Karen took a breath. He wasn't just a mule. He was a scout. Down in holding, Maddox sat in silence as Lieberman entered the room. No cuffs now. Just a cold table, 2 chairs, and a thin layer of tension hanging like fog. I assume you. No, we've grounded Flight 742, Lieberman said. Maddox smiled faintly. You're late. Let's try something new, Lieberman said. You talk. You help us stop the next drop. Maybe we get you into a cell with a window. Maddox's eyes narrowed. You're not listening. I'm not the operation. I'm the symptom. The people you're looking for? You won't find them on paper. You won't find them on any watch list. They're scientists, patriots in their own way. Patriots don't poison civilians. Who said anything about poisoning? Maddox leaned in slightly. Neurocell X was built to evolve us, elevate human potential. That's why I took it. That's why others still are. You're just scared of what happens when people stop needing systems to survive. Lieberman remained still. You're distributing unregulated biological agents across state lines. I'm distributing freedom, Maddox snapped, then grinned. And while you waste time parsing labels, another drop's happening tonight. Red light flashed outside the window. Karen appeared in the doorway, holding a new report in her hand. We've got a problem, she said. Lieberman stepped out with her into the hall. What now? Karen's voice dropped. Surveillance flagged 2 more pilots using similar aliases in different airports, Chicago and Phoenix. Both flew this week. And one landed 3 hours ago here in Dallas. Lieberman's eyes widened. Where's the other? Karen looked him dead in the eye. Still in the air. Touches down in LAX in 40 minutes. He didn't hesitate. Call Los Angeles. Ground everything inbound. Flag every pilot matching our pattern. And get a flight manifest. Karen was already moving. Down the hallway, Maddox chuckled to himself. Barely audible over the hum of the AC. Rex stood up again, ears twitching. The storm wasn't over. It was just starting. Inside the operations center at DFW, a temporary command hub had taken over an unused conference room. Above Terminal C, coffee cups balanced on computer towers. Maps of major airport hubs were pinned to walls, and Homeland Security agents worked. Side by side with FBI cybercrime units and airport security staff. On the central monitor, blinking red dots indicated flagged flights and personnel across the country. Karen stood near the front of the room, staring at a digital map connecting a dozen cities. Red lines webbed between Dallas, Chicago, Phoenix, Los Angeles, and even smaller airports like Boise and Raleigh. What started as a single odd pilot now looked like a coordinated logistics operation spanning the continental United States. Agent Lieberman spoke to the room. We believe Maddox was part of a larger network trafficking experimental neurological agents, using commercial flights as cover. They're targeting cities based on variables: weather, airport size, terminal traffic, even TS rotation schedules. He clicked a remote. A new screen displayed digital passports and falsified FAA credentials. Faces stared back, men and women in pilot uniforms, all operating under stolen identities. Karen felt the enormity settle on her shoulders. How many do we think are still active? A cyber agent named Kim rattled off numbers. 6 confirmed. Imposters in the last 90 days. 3 apprehended. 1 still airborne, heading toward LAX. 2 unknown location. But here's the twist. This isn't just about the people. It's about the supply chain. She pulled up a data stream of shipping. Manifests. They're not flying the vials anymore. Not always. Now they're using small cargo shipments disguised as biosample transfers, routed through third-party logistics companies. Some are getting dropped in flight bags, others hidden in secure freight pallets. We found Neurocell X residue on a cooling gel pack used in a Denver transfer last week. Karen shook her head. They've outgrown couriers. Maddox wasn't lying. He was the symptom. Lieberman looked grim. And the worst part is, someone on the inside is helping them. You don't get this kind of access without clearance, either FAA, TSA, or private security. Just then, Karen's phone buzzed. She answered, stepping aside. This is Willis. A shaky voice came through. Officer Willis, this is Samir Hassan. I'm the head of ground security at Phoenix Sky Harbor. We ran facial rec like you asked. One of the flagged pilots, Alec Brenner, was caught on CCTV talking to a senior TSA agent. No log of that pilot checking in officially. He was ... escorted past standard screening. Karen's chest tightened. You saying TSA cleared him without documentation? Yes. Agent William Rusk, 20-year veteran. But we pulled his access records. They spike every time one of your flagged flights took off. It's not a coincidence. Karen hung up and turned to Lieberman. We've got a mole in TSA. Probably more than one. He cursed under his breath. They're not just slipping. Through cracks, they're being let in. The room turned quiet. The implications were clear. Any one of them could be compromised. Any gate, any terminal, any shift supervisor could be part of this web. Karen motioned toward the map. So what's the endgame? They're distributing Neurocell X across the country. Are they testing it, selling it, weaponizing it? Kim hesitated. I dug deeper into Maddox's encrypted messages. He referred to something called the threshold, over and over again. As if the vials weren't the goal, they're just the key to unlocking something bigger. Karen frowned. Threshold to what? Before Kim could answer, another agent called out, We've got an update from LAX. Everyone turned. Flight 742 is descending now. ATC flagged the cockpit voice channel. The co-pilot made a strange transmission, asked if the passengers had experienced the shift yet. Karen's heart dropped. Get that plane grounded. No one leaves that aircraft until it's swept. Lieberman was already on the phone. With lax command, Karen turned to Rex, who stood beside her, ready, as always. She knelt beside him and whispered, We're in this now, boy. All the way. The network was unraveling, but fast wasn't fast enough. And whatever the threshold was, they were racing toward it. The sky above Los Angeles was painted in fading hues of lavender and gold as Flight 742 descended into LAX airspace. Inside the cockpit, the co-pilot's fingers drummed against the throttle. His voice crackled over the open radio channel just as the plane was handed off to final approach. Tower, this is Flight 742, confirming vector for landing. And just curious, he paused. Have the passengers experienced the shift yet? The words made no sense. But to the air traffic controller monitoring the transmission, it sent a jolt down his spine. He flagged the communication, notified his supervisor, and moments later, Homeland Security was alerted. The signal was already too weird, too close to everything happening in Dallas. Something wasn't right. Back at DFW, Karen stood over a desk cluttered with printed manifest logs and security footage still frames. The new intel was damning. Flight 742 wasn't just any flight. It was part of a testing corridor. Every passenger on board had been randomly selected by an algorithm built into an obscure airline partnership program. People who'd opted in for bonus miles, preferred upgrades, or wellness studies in fine print buried inside terms and conditions. What none of them knew was that the flight was being monitored by shadow accounts linked to shell biotech firms. This was the field trial, Karen muttered. They weren't distributing to cities. They were testing it on the flight itself. Rex sat beside her, ears perked. Lieberman burst into the room with his phone pressed to his ear. LAX has the plane on final. SWAT-S mobilizing. Pilot's been cooperative so far, but the co-pilot hasn't said a word since that weird broadcast. They're going to park the jet at an isolated gate and evacuate discreetly. Karen was already moving. I want eyes on every passenger as they deplane. Anyone coughing, sweating, twitching, pull them aside. Check for neurological signs. What are we looking for exactly? Lieberman asked. Karen grabbed her tablet and showed him a frame from a Department of Defense training manual. During Neurocell X trials, subjects exposed to airborne vapor showed disorientation, sensory flooding, and a delayed violent response to stimulus. They were calm until they weren't. Lieberman grimaced. So we don't know who's been dosed? Or what might trigger them? Exactly. At LAX, as the wheels of Flight 742 screeched against the tarmac, passengers glanced at one another. Some looked uneasy. A few rubbed their temples. One woman near the front clutched the armrest with white knuckles. No one knew why the plane was parking at a gate far from the main terminal. The captain announced calmly, "We're undergoing a routine maintenance check. Please remain seated." Outside, a swarm of federal agents in plainclothes moved in behind a blacked-out Homeland Security van. Medical response teams stood by with stretchers and portable neuro-evaluation kits. One agent carried a tranquilizer gun. The boarding door opened with a hiss. A flight attendant stepped out, pale. "Something's wrong with the co-pilot," she whispered. "He's not blinking." Lieberman's voice came through Karen's comms. "Deplaning starting now. We'll know in 5 minutes if this was a dry run or a detonation." Karen, still at DFW, watched the live feed from LAX's surveillance network. Passenger after passenger exited with varying degrees of confusion. One stumbled. Another wept softly. A third had to be led out by 2 crew members, dazed and mumbling about seeing fractals in the sky. Then came the co-pilot. He stepped into view, calm, hands at his sides. Karen leaned closer to the screen. The co-pilot turned to the SWAT team member nearest him and whispered something. The agent flinched and reached for his weapon. The feed cut out. "Reboot it," Karen barked. When it returned 5 seconds later, the co-pilot was on the ground, restrained and foaming at the mouth. 2 agents were down. One medic was screaming for atropine. They triggered a microdiffusion. Someone in the room said, "The whole cabin's been dosed." Karen's blood turned cold. "What about the passengers?" she asked. Silence. Rex let out a low growl. Lieberman's voice came through again, tight, shaken. "We need every airport in the country on red alert. This wasn't a delivery. This was phase 1. Karen looked at the map on the wall. If this was just the test, the real wave was still coming. News trucks crowded the perimeter of Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport the next morning, their satellite dishes stretching skyward like curious metal antennae. Reporters leaned over barricades, jostling for interviews. Flashbulbs clicked. Headlines flashed on live feeds across every screen inside the terminal. K9 Officer Rex uncovers national security threat. Airport hero dog may have prevented catastrophe. Inside the Homeland Security briefing room, it was standing room only. The press had been kept out, but a quiet ceremony had been organized not for Maddox, not for the agents who stormed Flight 742, but for the German shepherd who had started it all. Rex sat in the center of the room, panting softly, a medal draped around his neck. He didn't understand the applause. He didn't care for the cameras. He only perked up when Karen knelt beside him and whispered, "Good boy," while slipping him a bacon strip from her pocket. "He doesn't care about the praise," Karen said aloud, addressing the room of agents, officers, and federal directors. He just wanted to do his job. But if Rex hadn't sat down at Gate 27, if he hadn't stopped Maddox, we might all be telling a different story today. One with a much darker ending. Rex barked once, as if on cue, drawing a chuckle from the tense room. Agent Lieberman stood beside Karen and added, "We now believe the Neurocell X exposure on Flight 742 was a test of controlled dispersal and dosage. Thanks to this K9 unit and Officer Willis, we're months ahead of where we would have been. Hundreds, maybe thousands of lives were spared." Applause broke out again, but beneath the celebration, the air still hummed with unease. Because while Rex had pulled one thread loose, the rest of the web remained tangled. Maddox's network was more sophisticated than anyone imagined. Hours later, Karen stood alone with Rex outside the terminal, leaning against her unmarked SUV. The sun had already begun to dip, casting long shadows across the tarmac. Planes landed and took off, business as usual, as if the previous day hadn't nearly turned into the origin point of a national tragedy. Rex lay in the passenger seat, eyes alert despite his exhaustion. He hadn't slept more than a few hours. Since the incident, Karen hadn't either got her phone buzzed. It was Agent Grant. They analyzed the co-pilot from 742. His vitals stabilized. Turns out he was also a test subject, Maddox's successor, maybe even his handler. But here's the kicker, ... Karen listened, bracing herself. He had a chip implanted in his arm, not military issue. Private biotech, no registration. It transmitted data in real time during the flight behavioral readings, biometric changes, even passenger responses. Someone was monitoring it live, which means someone out there now has the results. Karen felt her grip tighten around the phone. Anyone know who received the data? Encrypted IP, routed through Sweden, then Taiwan. Dead end for now. Karen looked out at the runway. So this was just a field test. What happens when they scale it? They already are, Grant said. A second batch of vials was stolen from a research facility in upstate New York 2 nights ago. Identical chemical markers. We've got agents chasing ghosts from coast to coast. Whoever's behind this, they're not done. Karen hung up without saying goodbye. She climbed into the SUV, resting her hand on Rex's back. They think you're the hero, she whispered. But this isn't over, not even close. Rex closed his eyes, but didn't fully relax. He could sense it too, the energy, the tension in Karen's voice, the rhythm of her breath. Across the airport, the screen near Gate 27 still flashed headlines. About Rex. A new digital plaque had been installed by airport security, in honor of Rex, whose nose was sharper than any scanner. But plaques couldn't stop what was coming next. Karen started the engine. The world was already changing, and the war for control of the mind had just taken off. The sun had barely risen when Karen and Agent Lieberman met at a secluded warehouse on the outskirts of Dallas. The room buzzed with urgency. Intelligence had just confirmed the location of the second drop. It wasn't a plane this time. It was a truck carrying several crates labeled as medical supplies. Somewhere in those crates were dozens of Neurocell X vials, ready to flood the black market and worse, unsuspecting civilians. Karen's mind raced. Every hour lost meant more people exposed to a drug that could alter the very fabric of their minds. Rex sat quietly at her feet, alert as ever, his nose twitching against the faint smell of chemicals that lingered in the air. We're outnumbered, Lieberman said grimly, tapping his tablet. The warehouse is heavily guarded. They're expecting us. Karen nodded. No mistakes this time. The team geared up, loading weapons, securing communication devices, and checking every detail twice. The stakes were higher than ever. The weaponization of Neurocell X was no longer theoretical. It was happening on their watch. As they approached the warehouse under cover of dawn, Karen glanced at Rex. The dog was calm, but ready to spring into action. She whispered, "Let's bring this to an end, boy." Suddenly, movement. Shadows slipped between shipping containers. Lieberman gestured, and the team split, encircling the compound. Karen and Rex moved toward the main entrance, while Lieberman coordinated from the perimeter. Inside, the air was thick with tension. Crates lined the walls, and the faint hum of refrigeration units mixed with low voices speaking in hushed tones. They had to find the vials before the drop, Rex's ears perked. He sniffed the air, then suddenly bolted forward, barking sharply. Karen followed. Heart pounding. They reached a storage room where several men were unloading crates. One held a small vial up to the light, a sly smile spreading across his face. "Freeze!" Karen shouted. Gun raised, chaos erupted. Men scattered, but Rex leapt, grabbing the nearest man by the jacket and pinning him to the ground. Shots fired, but the team moved swiftly, rounding up the smugglers. Amid the chaos, Karen spotted a figure slipping through a side exit. She sprinted after him, Rex at her heels. The man darted into a narrow alley, glancing back. Karen closed the distance, but he threw something to the ground, an electronic device. "Rex, watch out!" The device exploded in a burst of light and smoke. Karen stumbled, coughing, as Rex barked fiercely, shaking the smoke off. When the haze cleared, the man was gone. Karen's tongue crackled. "We've secured the vials," but the lead target escaped. Lieberman's voice was grim. "We'll track him, but this isn't over. Whoever's behind this network has resources, and they're planning their next move." Karen knelt beside Rex, running a hand through his fur. "You stopped the first wave, buddy. Now it's up to us to stop the next." Days later, the nation breathed a tentative sigh of relief. Flight 742's passengers were safely quarantined, treated, and the spread of Neurocell X halted. Thanks to Rex, Karen, and the team, a disaster had been averted. Yet, as Karen stared at the glowing city skyline from her apartment window, she knew the fight was far from over. The shadowy figures behind the scenes remained elusive, their motives murky. But one thing was certain. With Rex by her side, she was ready for whatever came next. Because sometimes, the smallest nose can sniff out the biggest threats. And sometimes, heroes come on 4 legs. Asterisk.